The silence of abandonment Helvix pressed his secondary manipulators against the frost-covered viewport and stared into the infinite darkness beyond. The research station had been quiet for 6 cycles now, ever since the evacuation shuttle departed without him. He did not blame them. The mathematics were absolute. His respiratory system had begun failing after exposure to the unstable compound in Sector 9. Medical intervention would require resources the expedition could not spare. The choice had been clear. The Vryn had always prided themselves on logic. Emotion was inefficiency. Sentiment was waste. When Kelvix's lungs began to crystallize from the inside, when his breathing became labored and painful, the expedition commander had made the only rational decision. One damaged scientist could not justify the expenditure of supplies, time, and energy. The research data had been extracted. The mission objectives had been achieved. Kelvix's continued survival offered no measurable benefit to the Vryn scientific collective that he understood completely. He had voted for similar decisions himself on 3 previous expeditions. The weak did not drag down the strong. The broken did not consume resources meant for the functional. It was the way things had always been, the foundation upon which Vryn civilization had been built over 10,000 years. Their empire stretched across 47 star systems, precisely because they never wasted resources on lost causes. Kelvix dragged himself away from the viewport, his breathing apparatus hissing with each labored breath. The device was failing too. The oxygen recycler had begun making strange grinding noises 2 cycles ago. He had perhaps 4 more cycles of breathable air, maybe 5 if he remained perfectly still. Water would last 3 cycles. The heating system had already failed in the outer sections. The cold was creeping inward, deck by deck, room by room. He made his way to the central laboratory, where the long-range sensors still functioned on emergency power. Kelvix had maintained them not out of hope, but out of habit. A scientist observes until observation becomes impossible. That was the oath he had taken when joining the collective. Even in death, data could be gathered. Even in failure, knowledge could be preserved. The sensor display flickered, showing the usual background radiation of deep space. This region was designated as Zone 447 null, a vast emptiness between star clusters where nothing of interest had ever been detected. That was why the research station had been placed here, to study the absence of stellar phenomena, to understand the voids between the light. Kelvix had spent 14 cycles mapping the nothing, measuring the darkness, calculating the silence, but something had changed. His compound eyes focused on an anomaly at the edge of sensor range. An energy signature, faint but unmistakable. It did not match any known Vryn vessel classification. The pattern was irregular, almost chaotic compared to the clean efficiency of collective ships. He ran the signature through the database, searching for matches among the other spacefaring species known to the Vryn. Not Vryn, not the crystalline assembly, not the Hive collective, not even the mysterious wanderers who sometimes drifted through this sector in their ancient generation ships. This was something else entirely, something the database had no classification for. The energy output was substantial, suggesting a vessel of considerable size. And it was moving. Toward him. Kelvix felt something unfamiliar stir in his thorax, an emotion the Vryn had spent millennia breeding out of their species. Fear? No, not fear exactly. Uncertainty, perhaps. The unknown approaching while he sat helpless and dying. He checked the station's defensive capabilities, but they had been stripped before the evacuation. Standard procedure. No point leaving weapons on an abandoned facility, but the approaching vessel was now close enough for detailed scans. Kelvix's manipulators trembled as he read the data. The ship was massive, easily 20 times the size of a Vryn research vessel. Its hull was composed of materials the sensors struggled to identify. Strange protrusions covered its surface, some resembling weapon emplacements, others looking like sensor arrays of unknown design. The power signature suggested propulsion technology, far more advanced than anything in the new Collective's arsenal. His communications panel crackled to life, making him jump despite his weakened condition. Kelvix stared at it in confusion. The long-range communicator had been disabled before the evacuation. How was anyone transmitting to him? A voice emerged from the speaker, speaking in badly pronounced but understandable Vryn standard language. Research Station, this is the Terran vessel Horizon's Promise. We have detected your failing life support systems and are responding to provide assistance. Please confirm if you are in distress and require aid. Terran. Kelvix searched his memory. The word was familiar. The Vryn had heard rumors of a new species emerging from a distant spiral arm, a young civilization taking its first steps into the galactic community. Intelligence reports suggested they were technologically primitive, culturally unstable, prone to emotional decision-making. The Vryn Collective had classified them as low priority for diplomatic contact. Yet here was a Terran ship, in the deepest void of space, somehow detecting his failing station and offering assistance. Kelvix activated the transmitter with shaking manipulators. His voice rasped through the damaged breathing apparatus. This is Scientist Kelvix of the Vryn Research Station Observation 447. I am indeed in distress, but I must inform you that I possess no resources for trade. I cannot compensate you for any assistance. My government will not pay for my retrieval. There is no logical benefit to helping me. Silence followed his transmission. Kelvix waited, expecting the Terran ship to alter course and depart. Why would anyone expend resources on a dying scientist who could offer nothing in return? The mathematics were clear, even to a primitive species. But the Terran voice returned, and it sounded puzzled. Scientist Kelvix, this is Captain Maria Santos of the Horizon's Promise. We're not looking for compensation. You're in trouble, and we're in a position to help. That's all the reason we need. Can you provide details on your medical condition and station status? The words made no sense to Kelvix. No reason needed beyond proximity and capability? What kind of civilization operated on such principles? How had they survived, let alone achieved spaceflight, if they squandered resources this way? He provided the requested information, detailing his respiratory failure, the station's deteriorating life support, and his estimated time until death. He included every relevant fact, expecting the Terrans to realize the futility of intervention and move on. Asterisk instead, Captain Santos responded immediately. Copy that, Kelvix. Your condition is serious, but treatable with our medical technology. We're dispatching a rescue team now. Prepare for boarding in approximately 43 minutes. Try to conserve your oxygen and stay calm. You're going to be all right. Kelvix watched through the viewport as a smaller craft detached from the massive Terran ship and began accelerating toward his station. The rescue shuttle moved with purpose and speed, crossing the distance far faster than any Vryn vessel could manage. Inside, through the transparent sections of the hull, he could see figures in protective suits preparing equipment. They were really coming. For him. For no logical reason he could comprehend. The Vryn scientist pulled himself to the main airlock and waited. His breathing had become more difficult. Each inhalation felt like inhaling shards of ice. The pain was substantial now, breaking through even his species' legendary pain tolerance. He was dying, and these strange Terrans were racing to prevent it, despite having no rational motivation to do so. The rescue shuttle connected with a solid thump. Magnetic locks engaged. Pressure equalized. The outer door opened, and 3 figures in bulky white suits entered the airlock. They moved with practiced efficiency, their movements coordinated and purposeful. The inner door opened, and Kelvix got his first direct look at a human being. They were soft-looking creatures, their bodies encased in protective gear rather than natural armor. Their faces, visible through transparent helmets, were flat and smooth, with forward-facing eyes that marked them as evolved predators. Yet those predatory eyes showed no hunger, no aggression. Instead, they radiated concern and determination. The lead figure approached with hands visible and empty, speaking in that same careful Vryn pronunciation. "Scientist Kelvix, I'm Dr. Sarah Park. We're here to get you out of here and treat your condition. Can you tell me where you're experiencing the most discomfort?" Kelvix gestured weakly to his thorax, where his damaged respiratory system struggled to function. Dr. Park moved closer, her movements gentle despite the urgency. A second human, wearing a suit marked with red symbols, appeared beside her with a medical scanner. The device hummed as it passed over his body, gathering data far more detailed than any Vryn medical equipment could. Produce, severe respiratory. Crystallization, the medic reported in the strange human language before switching back to Vryn. Progression is advanced, but we've dealt with silicon-based respiratory failures before. It's within our treatment parameters, Doctor. Good, Dr. Park responded. Let's stabilize him here and get him to the ship. Set up the portable respiratory support. Kelvix watched in amazement as the humans unpacked equipment from their medical cases. They worked with speed and confidence, their hands moving in coordination despite never speaking to each other. Within moments, they had attached a strange device to his breathing apparatus. Clean, pure oxygen flooded his system, and for the first time in 6 cycles, Kelvix could breathe without pain. The relief was so profound, he nearly collapsed. "Easy there," Dr. Park said, her voice gentle through the translator. "We've got you. You're safe now." Safe. The word echoed in Kelvix's mind. He had never associated that word with his own existence before. Safety was irrelevant. Functionality was all that mattered. Yet these humans, these strange soft creatures from a distant world, were treating him as if his individual survival held inherent value. As if saving one dying scientist in the middle of nowhere was worth their time. Their resources, their effort. The third human, an engineer whose suit bore different markings, was examining the station's control systems. "Captain, someone deliberately sabotaged the long-range communicator. This wasn't system failure. This was intentional." Dr. Park's expression hardened. "Standard procedure for the Vryn," she said quietly, looking at Kelvix. "Right, scientist? When someone can't work anymore, you make sure they can't call for help either?" "It is logical," Kelvix replied, confused by the anger he detected in her tone. "Resources cannot be wasted on non-functional personnel. I would have done the same to others. I have done the same to others." "Well, we don't do that where we come from," Dr. Park said firmly. "Every life has value, regardless of productivity. You're a person, not a tool. And people don't get left behind to die alone in the dark." The words penetrated deeper than any Vryn philosophy Kelvix had ever learned. Value beyond function. Worth beyond productivity. These concepts violated everything he had been taught, everything his civilization had believed for 10,000 years. Yet here were the humans, acting on these illogical principles, rescuing him when logic demanded they should simply pass by. Dr. Park activated her communicator. "Horizon's promise. This is the rescue team. We have one Vryn male, critical condition, now stabilized. Requesting immediate medical evacuation and full respiratory treatment suite preparation." A voice responded from the ship, calm and professional. "Copy that, Dr. Park? Medical bay is ready. Bring him home." Home. Another strange word from these strange beings. Kelvix had a dwelling unit on the Vryn homeworld, a place where he stored his possessions and rested between assignments. But he had never thought of it as home. Home implied emotional attachment, sentiment, and efficiency. Yet the humans used the word naturally, as if it meant something profound and important. They lifted him carefully, supporting his weight between them as they moved toward the airlock. Kelvix looked back at the research station one final time. He had expected to die there, alone in the darkness, his body eventually freezing as the station's power failed completely. It was supposed to be his ending, logical and final. Instead, these illogical humans had appeared from nowhere and decided his life was worth saving. As they carried him into their rescue shuttle, Kelvix wondered what kind of civilization could survive while operating on such apparently wasteful principles. The Vryn had conquered 47 star systems through ruthless efficiency. Yet these humans, with their emotional decision-making and their insistence on individual value, had built a ship that made Vryn technology look primitive by comparison. Perhaps, Kelvix thought as the shuttle detached and began accelerating toward the massive human vessel. There was more than one kind of logic in the universe. Perhaps survival through compassion was as valid as survival through efficiency. Perhaps the humans understood something about existence that the Vryn, in all their ancient wisdom, had somehow missed. The rescue shuttle's interior was warm and well lit, so different from the dying cold of his abandoned station. The humans moved around him with practiced care, monitoring his vital signs, adjusting the respiratory support, speaking to him in calm and reassuring tones. They treated him like someone who mattered, like someone worth saving, like someone with inherent value beyond his ability to contribute to a collective goal. For the first time in his life, Kelvix began to understand what it meant to be treated as an individual rather than a functional unit. The realization shook him more deeply than his near-death experience. Everything he had believed, everything his civilization had built itself upon, suddenly seemed incomplete. Not wrong exactly, but missing something fundamental that these young humans had somehow grasped. As the horizon's promise grew larger in the shuttle's viewport, Kelvix made a decision. If he survived this, if the humans could truly cure his condition, he would dedicate whatever remained of his life to understanding them. Not to study them as specimens, but to learn from them as teachers. Because a civilization that could cross the void to save a dying stranger with no expectation of reward knew something profound about existence itself. The shuttle entered the massive ship's hangar bay, and Kelvix saw dozens of humans waiting there. Medical personnel with equipment, officers in uniform, even crew members who had no apparent reason to be there. They had all come to see the rescued scientist, to welcome him aboard, to celebrate that one more life had been saved from the darkness. Their faces showed genuine happiness that he had survived. In that moment, as the shuttle's doors opened and the humans carefully carried him toward their advanced medical facility, Kelvix understood the fundamental difference between his people and theirs. The Vryn had built an empire on efficiency. The humans were building something else entirely. Something that valued the individual as much as the collective. Something that saw strength in compassion rather than weakness. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was why their technology had surpassed his people's, despite their relative youth. Perhaps caring about each other, refusing to abandon the wounded, seeing value in every life. Perhaps these illogical principles somehow led to greater achievements than cold efficiency ever could. Kelvix closed his eyes as they placed him on a medical platform, finally allowing himself to feel the exhaustion he had been fighting for 6 cycles. He was safe now, truly safe, not because of logic or efficiency, but because humans believed he deserved to be safe. Simply for existing, it was the most illogical, most beautiful thing he had ever experienced. When humanity arrives, the medical bay of the horizons. Promise was unlike anything Kelvix had ever seen. Vryn medical facilities were functional spaces, sterile and efficient, designed to repair damaged workers and return them to productivity. This human facility was different. The walls were painted in soft colors. Plants grew in containers near the windows. Music played quietly in the background, something with strings and gentle rhythms that seemed designed solely to create a pleasant atmosphere. Dr. Park had explained that humans believed the environment affected healing. They thought comfort and beauty somehow helped bodies repair themselves faster. Kelvix found the concept absurd from a purely logical standpoint, yet he could not deny that the space made him feel calmer than any Vryn medical center ever had. Perhaps there was something to their methods after all. The treatment itself had been remarkable. The human doctors had used a combination of nanotherapy and targeted radiation to dissolve the crystallization in his respiratory system. The procedure would have been impossible with Vryn technology, which focused on replacement rather than repair. Within 2 cycles, Kelvix could breathe without mechanical assistance for the first time since his accident. Within 4 cycles, he felt stronger than he had in years. Captain Santos visited him regularly during his recovery. She was a tall woman with dark hair tied back severely, her uniform crisp and professional. Yet despite her military bearing, she spoke to Kelvix with genuine warmth and interest. She asked about his research, his life, his experiences. Not to extract useful intelligence, but simply because she wanted to know him as an individual. "How are you feeling today, Scientist Kelvix?" she asked on the 5th cycle, settling into a chair beside his medical bed. Chairs were another human peculiarity. The Vryn stood or rested flat. Humans seemed to need these intermediate positions, as if they could not quite commit to either activity or rest. "My respiratory function has returned to 93% of normal capacity," Kelvix replied, providing the data he assumed she wanted. "The medical staff estimates full recovery within 3 more cycles. Their technology is remarkably advanced." Captain Santos smiled, an expression that showed her teeth. Kelvix had learned this was a positive gesture among humans, not a threat display as it would be among many species. "I'm glad to hear that. But I was asking how you feel, not just what your medical readings show. Are you comfortable? Is there anything you need?" The question puzzled Kelvix. His needs were being met. His survival was assured. What other information could his feelings provide? Yet the captain waited patiently for an answer, her eyes showing genuine interest. He decided to attempt honesty, though the concept felt strange. "I am confused," he admitted finally. "Your people have saved my life, provided advanced medical care, and asked nothing in return. I have studied your species files in your database. You are relatively young on the galactic stage. Your resources should be precious. Yet you spend them freely on strangers. I do not understand how your civilization has survived such apparent inefficiency." The captain's expression shifted to something more serious. She leaned forward, her hands clasped together. "Kelvix, can I tell you something about human history? Something that might help you understand who we are? I would appreciate any information that provides clarity. 500 years ago, humans were very different than we are now. We were divided into hundreds of nations, constantly fighting over resources, territory, and ideology. We practiced efficiency in ways that would make your Vryn collective look wasteful. We abandoned people who couldn't contribute. We prioritized profit over compassion. We let the weak die while the strong prospered." Captain Santos paused, her eyes distant with memory of things she had only learned from history. "We nearly destroyed ourselves doing it." Kelvix's sensory organs focused intently on her. This was unexpected information. "What changed?" "The collapse," she said quietly. "A series of environmental disasters, resource wars, and social breakdowns that killed 3 billion people over 50 years. We came very close to extinction. And in that darkness, at our lowest point, we finally understood something crucial. Efficiency without compassion isn't strength. It's suicide disguised as logic." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars streaming past as the ship traveled through hyperspace. We learned that every person we save, every individual we refuse to abandon, makes us stronger rather than weaker, because those people go on to create, to innovate, to inspire others. The scientist we rescue today might discover something tomorrow that saves millions. The child we feed might grow up to write music that brings joy to billions. Value isn't just about immediate productivity. It's about potential, about possibility, about the inherent worth of consciousness itself. Kelvix processed this information carefully. You are suggesting that compassion is actually a survival strategy, not a weakness? Not just a suggesting, proving it. After the collapse, we reorganized our entire civilization around a single principle. No one gets left behind. Not the sick, not the elderly, not the disabled, not the poor. Everyone has value. Everyone gets care. Everyone matters. Captain Santos turned back to face him. And you know what happened? Our technology advanced faster than ever before. Our culture flourished. Our exploration of space accelerated beyond anything we'd previously achieved. Because when people know they're valued, when they know they won't be abandoned if they fail or fall, they take risks. They innovate. They push boundaries. Fear of abandonment makes people conservative. Security breeds creativity. The concept resonated through Kelvix's mind like a harmonic frequency. The Vryn prided themselves on their ancient civilization, their long history of conquest and expansion. Yet in all that time, their technological progress had been gradual, incremental. They improved existing systems, but rarely invented truly revolutionary concepts. Their society discouraged risk because failure meant abandonment. Better to maintain functionality than to attempt innovation that might result in injury or incapacity. You are implying that my civilization's efficiency is actually limiting our development. Kelvix said slowly. I'm not here to judge your culture, Captain Santos replied diplomatically. I'm just explaining ours. Humans decided that caring for each other wasn't a luxury we could afford only when times were good. It's the foundation everything else is built on. Our medicine is so advanced because we refuse to accept that anyone is beyond saving. Our ships are so fast because we need to reach people in distress quickly. Our sensors are so sensitive because we monitor for any sign that someone, somewhere, needs help. She returned to her chair and looked at Kelvix directly. You were alone in the darkness, abandoned by your people, left to die because the mathematics said saving you wasn't worth the cost. But we found you anyway, not because we were looking for you specifically, but because we're always looking. Every human ship monitors every frequency, every energy signature, every hint that someone might need assistance. Because that's who we decided to be after the collapse. That's what saved us from extinction and lifted us to the stars. Kelvix felt something shifting in his understanding of reality. The Vryn had always assumed their methods were optimal because they had survived for so long. But survival and thriving were different concepts. The Vryn had survived through harsh efficiency. The humans were thriving through compassionate innovation. And their technology, their culture, their very approach to existence proved which method achieved superior results. I would like to learn more about your people, Kelvix said carefully. If you would permit it, I would like to study human civilization, not as a specimen to be catalogued, but as a student learning from teachers. Captain Santos smiled again, wider this time. We'd be honored to have you, Kelvix. In fact, I was hoping you'd be interested. We could use a Vryn perspective on our operations. Maybe you could help us understand how to better communicate with other efficiency-focused species. Translation isn't just about language. It's about bridging philosophical differences. Over the following cycles, Kelvix began his education in humanity. Dr. Park taught him about medical ethics. The human concept that every patient deserved the best possible care regardless of their ability to contribute to society. Engineer Torres showed him how human ships were designed with redundant safety systems, sacrificing efficiency for the ability to save crew members in emergency situations. Various crew members shared their personal stories, telling him about times they had been helped, rescued, or supported when they were at their lowest points. One story particularly affected him. A young crew member named James told Kelvix about his childhood. "I was born with a genetic disorder," James explained. "My lungs didn't develop properly. In an efficiency-based society, I probably wouldn't have been given treatment. The resources required to keep me alive as a child were substantial. But humanity doesn't work that way anymore. I received years of medical care, multiple surgeries, experimental treatments. My parents never received a bill. Society simply accepted that I deserved life. And now?" Kelvix asked. "Now I'm the chief navigation specialist on this ship. I developed a new hyperspace calculation method that reduced travel time by 15% across the entire fleet. That discovery has saved countless lives by allowing us to reach emergencies faster. But I never would have been able to make that contribution if society had decided I wasn't worth the initial investment." James smiled. "Efficiency thinking would have killed me as a child and lost all the benefits my adult self provides. Compassion saved me, and through me, saved others. That's the logic humans operate on." The logic was sound, Kelvix realized. By investing resources in individuals without immediate return, humans created a society where those individuals could later provide returns that far exceeded the initial investment. It was long-term strategic thinking disguised as emotional decision-making. The Vrin optimized for immediate efficiency. The humans optimized for long-term flourishing. And the results spoke for themselves. On the 10th cycle of his recovery, Kelvix was cleared for full activity. Captain Santos invited him to the bridge, the command center of the massive vessel. The space was larger than any Vrin bridge, with multiple stations operated by specialists in various functions. But what struck Kelvix most was the atmosphere. Crew members spoke to each other with warmth and humor. They helped one another with tasks, even when it wasn't their specific duty. They operated not as efficient components in a machine, but as a community working toward shared goals. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal," one of the officers reported. Long-range sensors detect a damaged vessel approximately 4 light-years distant. Configuration matches Creel Empire design. The Creel were known slavers, vicious and cruel, even by the standards of harsh galactic realities. They raided other species for workers, treating sentient beings as property. Kelvix waited to see how the humans would respond. Surely even they would not waste resources helping their enemies. "Alter course to intercept," Captain Santos ordered without hesitation. "Prepare medical teams and damage control parties. Helm, maximum sustainable speed." "Captain," Kelvix said carefully, "the Creel are hostile to most species. They may see your assistance as an opportunity for attack or capture." "Doesn't matter," Captain Santos replied. "They're in trouble. We help people in trouble. That's what we do. Even enemies? Especially enemies. Because sometimes the best way to make a friend is to be one first, even when they don't deserve it." She looked at Kelvix with an expression of absolute certainty. "Besides, we're not doing this because we expect gratitude or because we'll benefit from it. We're doing it because those are people on that ship, and people don't get left behind. Not on our watch. Not ever." Kelvix watched as the human crew prepared for rescue operations. They moved with practiced efficiency, but efficiency guided by purpose rather than cold logic. They were efficient because being efficient allowed them to save more people, to help more beings, to extend their compassion across greater distances. Their efficiency served their values rather than replacing them. The horizons, promise dropped out of hyperspace near the damaged Creel vessel. It was listing badly, atmosphere venting from multiple hull breaches. The crew would be dead within hours without intervention. Captain Santos opened a communication channel and offered assistance in the Creel language. The response was hostile at first, suspicious of human intentions. But as the Creel ship's situation deteriorated, they reluctantly accepted help. Kelvix watched humans risk their lives to save Creel crew members, who had probably participated in slaving raids. The rescue teams extracted 17 Creel from the dying vessel, providing them medical care and temporary quarters. The Creel were confused, aggressive, unable to understand why anyone would help them without demanding payment or servitude in return. "You'll figure it out eventually," Dr. Park told one particularly hostile Creel warrior as she treated his injuries. "Humans help people. That's what we do. You don't have to understand it or like it. You just have to accept that you're alive, because we decided you were worth saving." In the days that followed, Kelvix observed the Creel crew members slowly coming to terms with human compassion. They remained wary and suspicious, but their hostility gradually decreased. Several began asking questions about human culture, unable to reconcile their preconceptions with the reality they were experiencing. Seeds of change, Kelvix realized, planted by simple acts of rescue and care. On the 15th cycle, the Horizon's Promise arrived at a human outpost station where both Kelvix and the Creel crew would transfer to vessels heading to their respective territories. Captain Santos met with Kelvix privately before his departure. "You've given me much to think about," Kelvix told her. "I do not know if I can convince my people to change their ways. 10,000 years of culture cannot be easily altered, but I can share what I have learned. I can be an example of what happens when someone is valued beyond their immediate productivity." "That's all we can ask," Captain Santos said warmly. "Change happens one mind at a time, one heart at a time. You're alive when you should be dead. You're healthy when you should be broken. That's a powerful testimony to a different way of living." "What will happen to the Creel you rescued?" Kelvix asked. "We'll return them to their territory with full disclosure of what occurred. What they do with that experience is up to them. Maybe they'll see us as weak and foolish. Maybe they'll see us as strong and principled. Maybe some of them will remember that humans saved them when they didn't have to, and that memory will change something. We plant seeds. We don't control how they grow." Kelvix prepared to depart, gathering the few possessions the humans had provided him. But before leaving, he turned back to Captain Santos with one final question. "Why did you really save me? You speak of principles and philosophy, but in that moment when you detected my failing station, what made you decide to help?" Captain Santos considered the question seriously before answering. "Because I've spent my entire career traveling through space, and space is vast and cold and indifferent. It doesn't care if we live or die. It doesn't value consciousness or creativity or potential. It's just emptiness. So when humans found ourselves out here in that emptiness, we made a choice. We decided that we would care. We would value life wherever we found it. We would be the warmth in the cold, the compassion in the indifference. Because if we don't care about each other, if we become as cold and calculating as the void itself, then what's the point of being conscious at all?" She extended her hand in the human gesture of farewell. "You matter, Kelvix. Not because of what you can do, or what you know, or how you can contribute. You matter because you exist. That's the truth humans learned from nearly destroying ourselves. That's the truth we carry to the stars. And that's the truth we'll defend with every resource we have, regardless of the cost." Kelvix took her hand carefully, mimicking the gesture. "I will carry that truth back to my people. I do not know if they will listen, but I will try. Because you saved my life when logic said you should not. And perhaps that illogical act will have logical consequences no one could have predicted. As Kelvix boarded the transport that would take him back to Vryn space, he looked at the horizon's promise one last time. The massive human ship hung in space like a declaration against the darkness, a monument to the idea that consciousness mattered, that individuals had worth. That compassion was strength rather than weakness. The Vryn had conquered 47 star systems through ruthless efficiency. But the humans were building something greater, something that transcended mere survival and reached toward actual meaning. They were creating a civilization where being alive was enough to deserve care, where needing help was enough to receive it, where every individual mattered simply for existing. Kelvix did not know if his people could learn this lesson. 10,000 years of cultural programming could not be easily overcome. But he had learned it. One Vryn scientist had been changed by human compassion, had seen the strength in caring, had understood that true logic included the value of consciousness itself. And if one could change, perhaps others could too. Perhaps the seeds planted by human rescue, by human care, by human insistence that no one gets left behind, would eventually grow into something that transformed the galaxy itself. Perhaps the mathematics of compassion, given enough time, would prove superior to the mathematics of efficiency. The transport departed, and Kelvix watched the horizon's promise fade into the distance. He was alive because humans believed he deserved to be alive. That single fact contained the power to reshape civilizations. If only people would listen. In the vast cold darkness of space, humanity had decided to be warm. In the indifferent void, they had chosen to care. And that choice, that impossible, illogical choice, had saved one dying scientist who would spend the rest of his life teaching others what it meant to value consciousness, to honor life, to refuse abandonment. The humans had arrived on the galactic stage, and nothing would ever be the same again. Asterisk.